Welcome to the next edition of 1 to 1 in 20. This is Thames Valley Chambers of Commerce, interviews with key business leaders from across the region. My name is Britton and I'm Chief Executive, and I'm delighted to be speaking to you for the first time since the COVID-19 lockdown from offices on Slough Trading Estate. In this session, quite topically, I'm talking to James Finnis. James is a seasoned commercial property advisor with Jones Lang LaSalle. We're going to be talking about the impact that COVID-19 has had on his sector, but also more broadly the advice that he's giving to occupiers and to landlords as we look to reimagine what commercial office space could look like post-COVID-19. So good afternoon, James. It's great to see you again. I should start by saying that I'm calling from our office for the first time. You've probably noticed that.
Very pleased to see someone back in the office, Paul. It's wonderful to see the blue sky outside and the a suspended ceiling above you.
I thought we would start there because as more people are starting to return to the office, and all that hard work's going in. So there's a self-interest in this conversation as well here. So all that hard work that's going in to make sure that everyone's safe and confident. So advice for me as a chamber in our situation, but also for all of our members as well, who are just starting to cautiously bring people back into the workplace.
Paul, I think that's a really good place to start and a great question. So the way that JLL have been looking at this has really been sort of a three-phase response. Respond, recover, reimagine. And from a workplace, kind of what does that mean? I guess in the short term, what have occupiers been looking to do? They've been looking to, where they can, save cost, look to rework their portfolio. Obviously, the lights have been out for a while, of course, whilst they follow social distancing guidelines from the government. The question now is, how do we recover? How do we get people back into the office? JLL, obviously, we manage many facilities. We act on behalf of many corporates, and we're advising them in terms of how they get the lights back on. And like you, sit in an office chair in an environment. JLL have published a re-entry guide alongside our sister business Tetris, and I don't know if through the powers of post-production wizardry, if you can bring up that URL link here, you're very welcome to share that with your membership. That would be great. What does that talk to? It talks to the well-being of staff. It talks about following social distancing guidelines. It talks about how employees and employers can use their space now following the current guidelines. But I think also it's a question then of how we reimagine our workplace. As you can imagine, many of my non-property friends have been saying to me, James, as an office agent, as an office sort of advisor, are you not out of a job time to come? And I think the question mark is how the office space reimagines itself, and how we get people back into the office safely, but to take advantage of all of the benefits that being an office space provides.
Yeah, I've seen the publication talk about, and we'll share it with the members. I think one of the simple things is it isn't just around bricks and mortar, is it? It's clearly around giving your teams the confidence, and I saw some focus around welcome pack, for example, FAQs, any changes in policy just to make teams feel that they etiquette, I think is the word that's put around, is the etiquette in the office as well.
And I think that's right. I mean, we've been talking about what does the new normal look like, and it's been a phrase that I think has been bouncing around because we're in a different world now. Whether we find a vaccine for COVID in the short or the medium term, the reality is that every business is going to be looking at their backup plan. They're going to be looking at their office space, and they're going to be looking at how they can leverage the skills and the technologies that they've invested in to enable people working from home. We've all become very familiar with our studies, with our kitchen table, with our back bedroom, whilst we operate. We've all become very familiar with Zoom meetings, with WebEx, with Teams, whatever it may be. And I think that infrastructure is not going to be forgotten about. There's been some really interesting work that's been coming out of the US, where people have been surveying American employees. And very much the overwhelming feeling is that employees want to get back into the office. Now, whether that is on a full-time basis or a part-time basis, my personal view is that we'll see more working from home. There'll be more flexibility in the working environment, and the technology that we've all, as I say, become very adept at using over the past 3 months that we'll leverage downstream. I think what the office space then becomes is perhaps slightly different from what we've seen before, and maybe some of the functional pieces perhaps can be delivered in a home working environment or a part home working environment. But if I look at productivity and in particular innovation, the accidental meetings, if we look at office space and how it's been used over the last few years with the advent of co-working and the growth in serviced office space, it's been about those accidental meetings which drives innovation and collaboration. And as someone who's running a team of agents, running a team of people who are inherently coming up with innovative ideas and looking to bounce off each other, it's very difficult to deliver in a tech environment, however good your tech platform is. So, as I say, this goes back to that third point that JLL are thinking about, which is the reimagining of space and how we use our office space. That's going to change. I don't think we can get away from that, but I think it's a question of how that's going to evolve our design and how occupiers use and fit out their accommodation.
That reimagination though, James, I mean, it strikes me, a lot of the things that you're talking about there are about smarter use of space, but perhaps using less commercial office space. So what does reimagination mean for your colleagues and leaders in your sector? Because it does sound like there are, for many sectors, there are tough times ahead for commercial property. Any thoughts on that?
I think it's a very valid question to ask, because all of the narrative is about more home working. Well, that essentially means less desk in commercial office space. I think there are a few buts there. The first is that for many years we've seen a trend of tenants taking less space but better space. And there's a number of reasons for that. The war for talent is clearly a very important one. If you're in life sciences or tech, you've got to be in the right building, the right location in order for you to be competitive in the job market. But if tenants are driving to better space but less of it, that is still inherently good for the health of the commercial property market, because people are still acquiring space. They may, as I say, might be taking less of it, but it's taking the right space, the best space that's coming through. I think there is this piece about efficiency and density. We've seen a consistent pressure on density, people putting more and more people into less square foot. Now, my sense is that COVID and perhaps well-being and health will push that the other way. So if you look at some BCO research, they were pointing at average occupancy density at 1 to 9.6, one person to 9.6 square meters. My sense is that as a result of COVID, there will be an easing of that pressure. We'll perhaps see a little bit more space per person. So whilst I absolutely accept, and I think it's the right argument, that there'll perhaps be fewer people actually travelling on a day-to-day basis into their office space, I think what we will see is perhaps a slight easing of that density pressure and that people will breathe out. Because well-being is about fresh air, it's about natural light, it's about space, it's about breakout space. I think there is also this point that will come through about noise and efficiency. And I think where density had been really concertinaed down, I think there was an issue in terms of how efficient people were in their workspace. So I think the result of this, what's the impact on COVID on what I do, office leasing? I think occupiers, as I say, will reimagine their space. I think where they trade for space, they might take less of it, but it will be the better space that they'll focus on.
Well, I spent the first 10 years of my working life in what I think they used to call cellular offices, and I spent the rest of my career, particularly in the position I'm now at the Chamber, where looking to create more open plan space and more room for collaboration. It'll be interesting to see over the weeks and months ahead whether that reimagination, as you put it, means more of a return to some of the cellular space that we had in the past.
I think that the cellular piece has some advantages from a COVID perspective, but equally has disadvantages in terms of collaboration. And I think for me, the biggest single draw for people to the office space and to the hub that is an office is collaboration. How do you have, as I say, those accidental meetings? How do you innovate? Bringing people together virtually is incredibly difficult. To come up with those, the regularity of new ideas and the little thought, oh yes, I've seen that person traveling up in the lift. I need to talk to them about this. Let's take a particular project forward. And I think that doesn't go away in a post-COVID world.
You mentioned the environment being so important now, and that the fresh air and the greatest amount of space in which for ideas and for teams to flourish. What do you think that means for this region, where perhaps we've won, where in the past where occupiers in London have perhaps reimagine's probably not the right word there. They've looked at costs, they've looked at the congestion, and decided they want to be further westwards. Is COVID going to accelerate that process? Do you see what impact do you see for the Thames Valley and for some of the schemes you've got lined?
Yeah, and I think that's it's a trend that we've already seen start. So for me, I focus on the Greater London and South East market. And for many years, we've seen inward migration. We've seen occupiers going into the black hole, that centre, that gravitational pull of London, where talent and new buildings have been coming through. I think absolutely there have been a number of things that we've already seen, and our occupier clients are evidencing this in practice. The first is hub and spoke, if you will. We saw this previously post 9/11, when a number of occupiers took disaster recovery facilities out of town around the M25, in particular in West London and the Western Corridor. I think what we will see this time is a product of employees sat at home, enjoying their study for 3 months, enjoying no commute. I think that employees are going to put pressure to have spoke facilities that can work alongside their central London hub. So I think we will see a number of satellite offices coming forward, and I absolutely see Slough, Maidenhead, Reading as 3 really good centres for that, in terms of where employees are currently getting on the train going to London. So I think that's one thing. I think the second piece is about the cost and congestion of London. And whilst London absolutely still has, a bright light and a bright star, I think that point about talent, cost, and some staff who perhaps are going to be reluctant to jump straight back on the train going into London. I think that the opportunity of cycling, walking, running, driving to work in the regional office market is going to become very interesting and exciting for them. Now, of course, the real challenge there is, how do investors, developers in my market respond to that challenge? There's some great kit available in the M4 corridor. We've got, the Future Works in Slough as a really good example of a great connected building that we think could absolutely answer that question. You go into Reading, where agents on Station Hill Reading, it's going to be 1,000 BTR units, built to rent residential units, alongside 600,000 square foot worth of offices. So I think that live work development will be part of the answer and part of the challenge to central London. If I look slightly further afield, Cambridge has been incredibly busy over the last few years. I see that success in Cambridge transferring to Oxford as a part of the life sciences growth. And you might have seen in the press last month, Brookfield Asset Management buying a 50% stake in Harwell. The life sciences growth story in the Western Corridor, the Thames Valley, has been extraordinary. And as a global sector that has real growth potential in a post-COVID world, it's very well placed to leverage that. But going back to that point on will we see occupiers coming out of town? Yes, we will. I think it might not necessarily be the HQ function, but it will be spokes that sit alongside that. But that's great. We need new growth companies coming out here, because my belief is when they come out here, they'll understand the talent pool that exists, particularly down the M4 corridor, and their ability to pull in from Oxford and pull in from the other leafy suburbs, and they will grow and flourish as a result of that.
That space you're talking about, where it's not necessarily an HQ, I'm making the assumption that you're already embedding in some of the schemes that you're working on some serviced office, working in old school language, serviced office type space.
Yeah.
How confident are you that we have got that mix right at the moment? And what can you see you and your colleagues advising occupiers and landlords on post-COVID, just to kind of tap into that trend that we're predicting around companies moving out into the Thames Valley?
So I think there's going to be a few answers to that question. For me, the co-working service market has a very broad definition. True co-working often is a front to serviced offices. Now, serviced offices, I think, will continue to grow in this geography. There will be a demand. I know that the handbrake has been on that particular car over the last few months, and understandably so. Nevertheless, there is demand by occupiers for good quality fitted space, so it will grow. I think the area that I think that is going to see most growth is landlord white label operations, where a landlord who owns the building packages up a flexible office solution. We've seen this in central London with British Land, with Land Securities, with others doing it. Arlington, a big business park operator, have their own brand, and we will see other big landlords doing that and creating facilities which provide more flexibility for the office occupier. What we've also seen is a number of landlords, Aberdeen Standard Investments, putting in Cat A plus facilities, where they fitted the space out, and then you take the space, you rent the office space and the fit out as part of one. And we'll see more of those delivered in the Thames Valley. What we'll also see is, I think, some grey space returning to the market, tenant release space. Maybe they're going to be downsizing, right sizing, to accommodate that some of their staff who will be working from home. Those suites, I think, are going to be really interesting for the occupiers who are coming out of London. We're talking with a lot of our occupiers now about this grey space, how we can help them use that space to generate, returns, to return some of the costs that they're bearing on it. But I genuinely believe that's going to be attractive to those occupiers who are coming out from central London.
One would think that the occupiers are looking very closely at their lease terms at the moment, and you would be supporting them in conversations with landlords to say, look, where we've got spare capacity here, let's both work together to do something sensible with it, rather than us downsizing at the end of our lease. Absolutely. There's a lot of conversations about lease re-gears, renegotiations, looking at the space, how can it be repositioned, repurposed, but also, as I say, as the market begins to turn again, and we started undertaking inspections over the last few weeks, which has been great to get the market going, obviously following social distancing guidelines very carefully, but that space is very attractive to the market because it reduces the occupier's capital. They don't have to put in the Cat B, the fit out, the desks, the chairs, and the other facilities. Yeah, very good. Well, one would imagine that you mentioned the relaxation of the lockdown for the construction, but particularly for the commercial property and residential property market.
Yeah.
What's your early signs about the impact on that? Finally, just any there will be green shoots, but how optimistic should we be about the recovery and how quickly your sector is going to pick up again?
I think that different elements of our business have fared differently during this period. Clearly a large part of our team is industrial warehousing. They've been very busy during the crisis and responding as you would expect, with both the retail and the online market. In terms of the office sector, I think that we will recover, and we'll probably recover quite quickly. It's just a question of what the new normal looks like. For us to get back fully occupying our buildings, it feels like it's a little while off. I think there's going to be a period of this social distancing, which means that we have to maintain all of the guidance that we've got in our re-entry booklet. and I think that's going to take some time. It's notable that the investors are still very interested in investing in the UK, and very much so in Greater London and the South East market. That's fantastic. It's just finding the right product for them to invest in. I think in terms of new development, I think that's going to be pretty limited for a period of time. It always takes a while for people to be prepared to take the risk on new speculative schemes. But I do think that will come in, because the base attributes of what this market delivers remain fantastic. International connectivity, access around the UK. The bit that I just can't get away from, though, is talent. The talent pool in this market is phenomenal, and that's why employers and investors want to come to the Thames Valley. And I do think that the opportunity that we have post-COVID, as occupiers look to operate hub and spoke, that's a real opportunity for us to sort of recapture the imagination of those occupiers that have gone into London and kind of forgotten about this a bit as an area. And I think it's a great opportunity for Greater London and the South East to get those businesses back in, and for them to understand that they can thrive here.
Well, I know you're working on schemes through the towns you mentioned earlier, Slough, Maidenhead and Reading. I think the message I'm getting is that because those schemes are underway, and because they have momentum, that we should be seeing those through, and we should see the fruits of all that labour. Perhaps for those areas that are outside the Thames Valley that we're looking at new schemes coming on board, less optimistic for those areas that we're perhaps looking at new, breaking new ground over the next weeks and months?
Yeah, I think that for me, the areas and the towns and locations that will flourish will be those that have access to talent. If you look at the university towns in this geography, they're going to thrive. And I reference Oxford in particular. Oxford is a market that absolutely will see development, and quick development as well. It will recover like Cambridge very quickly post-COVID. I think that the other towns that we've spoken about, in particular Reading, Maidenhead and Slough, they've got the right attributes, and they've got a fantastic array of existing occupiers. In terms of when you start to go beyond those geographies, I think they will respond in different ways. I was asked a question quite recently during another session about permitted development rights and the conversion of office building to residential. I think I was unique on that panel in saying, actually, I'm in support of PDR, done in a controlled way, perhaps, because of the way that it's rejuvenated areas and has seen buildings that would have been demolished being repurposed for residential. Now, as a great advocate of sustainability, and particularly with net zero carbon around the corner for new stock, a great believer in repositioning and repurposing of buildings rather than seeing them lost. So therefore, for me, PDR has been good, and I think we'll see in some locations where the office stock doesn't have that demand, we will see them repurposed for an alternative use, and as I say, be that to residential or another use that's complementary to the town centre.
Okay, so just to close, finally around that, if you're able to give advice to an occupier or client such as myself around the restart, what would you share? What would be one of the main takeaways? Just give me some encouragement that the hard work that we're putting in right now is the right thing to be doing.
My sense is that employees want to be back at their desks. My sense is that they want to be back at their desk. I think employers and occupiers can help their staff to return and look at health and well-being in the broader spectrum. I think there's lots of things that we can do as employers to encourage their teams back to work, to boost productivity, and to do all of those things that we did in our office space before to innovate. I think that the health of the Western Corridor and Thames Valley market, because of its attributes, it will return to health, in my view, quite quickly. But there is going to be a period of recovery. What we've got to do as a chamber and thinking about this geography is make sure that we're shouting about it loudly, and encouraging those footloose occupiers that perhaps are in central London and thinking about how they can move forward. We've got to make sure that we are being vocal to them, and illustrating what we can deliver in this area.
100%. I'm with you. Thank you, James.
Brilliant.
It's despite the challenges, it's great to hear you and your team are upbeat, and that there are some really positive regeneration projects across the Thames Valley that we can report on over the next few weeks and months. So
very good.
Thanks again. Good to see you.
Thanks for that. Cheers.